first?
Sure. Well, I'm Andrew Kong, and it's a real pleasure to welcome everyone to this first TILOS seminar. TILOS started its operations just over 2 weeks ago on the 1st of November. And among many other things, we look forward to sharing research with each other and the broader community via seminar talks such as Arya's today. So just a welcome, and let me hand things back to Yusuf, who is our Associate Director for Research, and will introduce Arya.
Sure. Okay. All right. So yeah, like Andrew said, welcome everyone. It's really exciting to finally launch our TILOS seminar. It's great to have Arya Mazumdar to give us the inaugural TILOS seminar today. And the title, appropriately enough, is a mixture of past, present, and future. So let me just say a few words about Arya. He's currently an associate professor at the Halijolu Data Science Institute at UCSD. He got his PhD from University of Maryland, College Park. And before joining UCSD, he spent some time in MIT, University of Minnesota, and then several years in UMass Amherst. He has received multiple awards, including the Distinguished Dissertation Award for his PhD work and NSF career. So Arya has a broad range of research interests, has done extensive work in coding theory, information theory, learning, federated learning, and distributed optimization. As you all know, at TILOS, he co-leads, together with Nishis, co-leads the foundation team. So I very much look forward to Arya, your talk today about learning mixed models. And without further ado, the floor, the virtual floor is now yours.
Thank you very much, Yushu, for that kind introduction. I mean, Yushu have been sending emails. I think she sent 5 emails yesterday and the day before reminding everyone about this seminar. And Andrew has been like emailing me for the past week and beyond, just asking me if everything is going smooth. I mean, this kindness is really hard to miss, by the way. Right. So what I'm going to present today, it's the title of the talk is a bit ambitious, but so this is a very classical field in statistics, learning mixtures, and I'm certainly not qualified to present all of it. And I'm also, we do not have the time and scope to do that. However, I couldn't resist myself giving a catchy title for once. So most of this work that I'm going to present is from the PhD thesis of my student Shombrata Pal, who just graduated and is going to be a postdoc in Google Research. So I have also borrowed a lot of slides from Shombrata for this presentation. So at some point, if I cannot answer your question, you know where to go to. Okay. So the scope of the TILOS project, like this is an AI Institute for Optimization sitting within the Data Science Institute. It's pretty big, but I think across the board, theoreticians or practitioners, we all sort of recognize that there is, okay, why the slides don't move. Okay, yeah, there is an issue of data heterogeneity whenever we talk about data science. So we have seen unprecedented success in prediction for data, and we have seen some success in using machine learning for decision making as well. However, in all of these cases, data that we generate are coming from very different sources, and maybe one theory or one model for those data is not sufficient. And this issue of heterogeneity that comes up again and again in many different fields, for example, internet search engines, product placements, market analysis, inventory control, we have a lot of data that are being generated, but they are not coming from, they're not following a single nice format. They don't have one nice structure within this. Okay. So as an example, within the TILOS project, we can think of 2 applications. One is recommender system, where we have a bunch of people who every day rate different services. They might rate movies, they might rate restaurants. And if you try to design and learn from their ratings and try to design one recommender system that will recommend a movie to a person or a restaurant to a person, it's never going to be easy, because all the people, the way they rate things, or the way they do things, it's not falling into one single model, right? So these are complicated things for how the data is generated. Similarly, in federated learning, which is a big part of the TILOS project, we talk about this user, personal commodity devices spread all over, and they have different type of data, and we want to do personalization and whatnot. And there is a central server which is combining data from each of these users, and then trying to make some inference, or trying to direct them to make some decision making. All these are pretty different because users are collecting and generating different kind of data. Right? So they are not following one model for data. And this is like, now we are in the age of data deluge. The problem is even more, but it is a classical problem. Right? You can think of classical unsupervised learning problem of fitting a distribution. So this being like, for past 200 years, people are usually doing this. So for example, we see a curve over here, which is shaped like a bell. And this is the distribution of human heights in. So this is a histogram, like it's quite smooth. And suppose we want to fit a distribution or a probability distribution over here, right, to model this data. Very nice. So the way people usually do it is to fit a Gaussian distribution. Gaussian distribution is, or the normal distribution, they're called normal because they come up naturally as this bell curve in different type of histograms, right? So if you see this curve closely, by the way, Gaussian distribution is actually not the best thing that you can fit over here. So let me just break it up. It turns out that there are two Gaussian distributions that are actually hidden here, and that will perfectly fit the data. So if you were trying to fit one Gaussian, one bell curve over here, you cannot do it because it is slightly skewed. So if you go and look at the top over here, it's not, there is certain irregularities over here, but that can be addressed by identifying that there are actually women and statistical, I'm just talking about statistical significance here. There are women and men in this population, and they have two different bell curves that are hidden under over here. So that's all about mixtures, right? So this is a mixture of two Gaussians, and they are here since 1894. So that's like 125 years ago, 127 years ago, Pearson's came up with first mixture modeling for Gaussians. And I'm going to tell that story over here. So this is the main task is to given the data points, and many times they're not as simple as just as human height, which is a one-dimensional data. They can be high-dimensional data. And the main task is given the data points or samples, figure out the parameters of the two Gaussians. So Gaussian distributions are parameterized by their mean and their variance, or the standard deviation. So we have one distribution, and we want to basically figure out the components of those distributions, assuming they have Gaussian components, and then finding out the parameters of those components, right? So if we can do that in the previous example, we will have the average male height and the average female height, and then we can calculate the standard deviations, okay? However, the trick is that we do not have this data come up with different levels for men and women. They basically came up unleveled. So this is an unsupervised learning problem. So we want to do that clustering while we are figuring this out. Okay. So the results of mixture models starting from 1894, they are numerous. Okay, and I'm just giving you a snippet of like I sort of picked up, it's not completely randomly I have picked up these results, but suppose for now, this is a sample of, or a very small subset of all the results available. So the results come in different type of flavors. Okay. So one thing is just what I said, parameter estimation, which is going to be the focus of this talk as well. So you are given a distribution, you want to find out the parameters of that distribution, assuming that it is coming from some family. So we assume Gaussian mixture, that's a family of distribution, and therefore we want to find out the means and the standard deviations of all components in that family. It can just be density estimation, where you just want to find out a probability distribution that closely resembles the histogram that you have. Okay? So you just give me a density, a probability density, and the density estimation can either be some family of distribution that you pre-specify. So usually these are density estimation is done via how good your estimation is done via some statistical distance measure, and we are going to come to that a little bit later on. But there can be proper learning where you are given a class of distribution. You want to learn a distribution from that class that best fits your data. And many times you don't even have a class, you just want to come up with a distribution. So there's this proper learning, improper learning that falls under this density estimation. So most of the, like all of this talk and all of the story about mixture that I'm going to give you is about parameter estimation. Okay. So how good are actually this Gaussian mixture? How good a model for data they can be? And the answer is they're pretty good. So you can actually design very different type of pattern using just Gaussian mixture. In particular, I want to tell you about this skewed unimodal density. You see, this looks like a bell curve, but this is skewed. So you will not find a single Gaussian to fit this. Exactly in the case, what happened in the case of human height. But you can easily find two Gaussians that will actually fit the skewed unimodal densities. If it is bimodal, then you can even visualize the Gaussians. So the means are separated. And these two cases are actually pretty, like they will tell you when things are easy versus when things are hard. So if you look at this figure number 6, which is a bimodal density, and you can visualize this data and you can clearly see that there are two Gaussians hidden over here. However, demixing in this case, where your means, the means of the Gaussians are not separated, the separation between them is less than their individual standard deviations, the problems become much harder. How do you find the components? So Gaussian mixtures are pretty powerful model for data. As a matter of fact, with a small number of components, they can fit almost, so there are some universality theorem about Gaussian kernels, like how good an approximators they are for arbitrary analytic functions. So with a small number of components, I think the maximum number of components that we have over here is 7 or 8. You can fit all of this kind of data, or you can design all of these figures. Okay. Right. So mixtures, because of this property, Gaussian mixtures have been studied both in all of these cases: parameter learning, density estimation, proper learning, and improper learning. There are many, many papers that have been generated in the past 100 plus years. Mixtures, by the way, sometimes can come from quite unexpected spaces. So let me give you an example where you not think this as a problem of mixture, but it is actually a problem of mixtures. So this is a problem of trace reconstruction, which has application in DNA sequence reconstruction. So I am actually simplifying the DNA sequence reconstruction a little bit. So you have this very long, you have very long DNA sequences, which are, not binary sequences, but they have a size 4 alphabet, a quaternary sequence, because there is ACDT, there are these 4, the size of the alphabet is 4, and you have a very long string. And what you can do, what you get to see is short snippets of a very long sequence. Sometimes it might happen like this: you want to reconstruct a genealogy tree. So there might be one actual DNA sequence, and then there are many deletions over the years, and you can actually see traces of that sequence. Or you might just want to do DNA storage, and you want to basically write your information in DNA, and then they are being broken down into short string. Like when you are reading that back, you just get to read a short snippet, or short random snippet of the sequence. Okay, so a very idealized version of that problem And you can actually specialize it. So like a spherical chicken thing is to consider this problem where you have a binary vector that is a 0-1 vector, and it goes through a deletion channel, and each bit is deleted with probability 0.5. Okay? So with half probability, instead of 0.5, you can say 0.7 or 0.9, doesn't matter. And what you get to see are random traces. So what are these? These are random subsequence of the original sequence. Okay? And the task is to reconstruct the original sequence from this from this number of traces, right? So how many traces would you need to reconstruct that exactly, reconstruct the original binary vector exactly or approximately, and can you do it with some efficient algorithm? So it turns out that this is actually a parameter recovery problem in mixtures. Okay. It's not straightforward to see at all, or at least I cannot see it that way. However, this is a mixture problem. So I have a backup slide which explains why it is a mixture problem. So if we have time at the end of this talk, I will explain why this problem is a mixture learning problem, but I'm not going to go there because that would be a slight digression. Okay. Okay, so this is one type of mixture that has been very classical, like the problem of Gaussian mixture. Now, sometimes the data can be such that it's not itself heterogeneous, but the mixture is somewhere in functional relationships. Okay, so far we were talking about unsupervised learning, but think of supervised learning where we have some features and levels. Okay, and so in that case, like in machine learning, the main task is to figure out, like, from the samples of such labeled data where you have a bunch of features and corresponding labels, the task is to find out a model or a relationship between the covariates or features and the labels. Okay. It might happen that the data that you have that is not following one model. It is exactly the case that we mentioned in the federated learning case. So it might be the case that you actually have a mixture of two models. And although it is not as old as the concept of mixtures, it is also pretty old. It's coming from 1980s. So here is some data about music perception. So you have a population and you play a note. Over here is the frequency of the note. I forgot the exact leveling of the x-axis. Frequency of the note that are being played. And then this is actually people's perception. They are then asked to play the same notes. Okay. And you basically take a sample of population and you play something for them, some note in a keyboard. You don't show them what key you pressed, and then ask them to press the same key. Okay. And there is a plot over here, what they have done. And if you try to fit a model, it's pretty complicated data. It's like going up and down, and like maybe you will need many parameters and a very complicated relationship. But it turns out that you can model this data perfectly using only 2 lines. Right? So there are really people like me who are tone deaf. No matter what you press, I'm just going to press something over here and confuse you. Okay, so there are actually 2 lines. So there are this set of people who recognize there is a linear relationship. So they sort of recognize the tone pretty well. And there are like some group, they just cannot distinguish. So I cannot do this for color. I cannot do this for music. So there are other people like me as well. Okay, so, and you see, you have this data and you cannot beforehand tell whether someone is an expert or not. Right? So, but you still want to fit a model. So why don't you try to fit two models, and then the data becomes much more explainable. And similar thing here is one other data. So all these are small data, but you can think in high dimensions. This, like, you cannot even visualize, and these problems are becoming more and more prominent, right? So this figure is quantities in the x-axis. There is quantities in tons of a fishery product import, and then there is values in 1,000 euros, right? So how much they cost. And you see that there are, so there are a bunch of nations, like all the EU countries, they're importing things from a third country. So the third country might be, say, China or some other, like, I don't know, Ghana or somewhere. So when they are importing this thing, there are like certain EU countries, which are say MS7 versus some others, say MS11, and they are paying different price. Right? So if you don't know these things, then this data is not going to make much sense to you. But once you find the two lines and plot this, you are going to see that there are these MS7 countries. And even then, there are like these two lines. So there are preferential treatment because countries may have, some of the EU countries may have some, some treaties, and this is the price they have set. And there are clearly two groups of countries that are coming up from here. And there is actually an abnormal flow over here, which is actually a single country MS11. I don't know what that is. I should have just read this data in a bit more detail. But mixture of linear regression and therefore a pretty powerful tool. And starting from 1980s, there are some work. In the last 10 years, there are significantly more work. So I'm going to go into those works in a little more detail because they are more recent. Right. So this doesn't have to be only regression data. The other task in machine learning is classification, and you can also have mixture of classifiers. And you can think of recommender system where you basically just give thumbs up or thumbs down to a movie or a restaurant, where you're just saying this thing is good, this worked for you versus this didn't work for you. And the data can be, so maybe I am using some service, say Google TV, in my device, and sometimes they give options to rate. Sometimes we just watch movie, and there are like 2 users here. Well, actually 3, because my son also started using that. So my wife watches some movies, I watch some movies, and we sometimes rate whether they are +1, or -1 for us, good or bad. And our tastes vary pretty highly. Like it's actually widely different. And over the populations, they can be pretty different as well. So if I say that some restaurant is bad, it's not necessarily that is bad for Yushu or so on. So exactly like regression, there can be all this data that are classifier data, XY pairs, where Y is just binary levels or maybe some other like discretized levels.
Arya,
yes.
Can I ask you a question, please?
Yes.
Okay, so you're saying that there won't be a single model that would work well for you as well as your wife? Is this what you are saying? Okay.
Sometimes we have an option of creating a profile and separate it completely, but in many cases you cannot. Maybe suppose, so I don't want to name the services, but in many services you cannot, in many cases.
Right. Have 2 different profiles, and then for each profile you're saying that you need a model.
Right. So so that's you're putting the burden on the user that they profile themselves. In many cases, suppose you are using like Yelp, you don't really, like user don't really know what their profile is like, and there are like numerous of them. So you don't want to really do that, right? So you just collect their rating and say something.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So I think, so this is basically the setting that we are working on, and hopefully I have convinced you that this has applications in data science. Okay, so now let us go a little more technical and try to model this thing mathematically. I promise you that I will not dwell on the mathematical models much, but just to, I need them to clarify some terminology and also to make things precise. Okay, so mixture models are pretty well known. So usually the way it works is you have some class of distribution. So say P theta, which are parameterized by this theta. So an example is Gaussians with fixed variance, and the mean is varying, right? So theta can be any real number over here. So you can, right? So now you have unknown parameters. So there are capital L components in this mixture. So you have theta 1, theta 2, theta L. All of these are unknown. And now you have a generative model where you generate samples from the mixture distribution in the following way. you uniformly or sometimes non-uniformly choose a number between 1 to L. Okay, so this is a latent variable. This is not something you can see. This is uniformly chosen. And then your actual sample that you can see is generated given that latent variable t according to the distribution with parameter theta t. Okay. So that's how your samples are being generated. You sort of miss the, you don't see the choice of the latent variables, because if you see them, it makes things easy. So that's basically the profile that you are in. Okay. So that's the generative model for mixtures. You can do it for Gaussian mixtures. Like most of the work so far has been in Gaussian mixtures, but you can do it with other mixtures. Poisson mixtures, because suppose you want to model some arrival process and things are different because, because of multiple reasons. It can be binomial mixtures and so on. Okay. So now we can also model functional relationships in this way. So again, we have unknown parameters, theta 1, theta 2, up to theta L. Suppose they are all d-dimensional vectors. D is the dimensionality of your features. So you have mixture of linear regressions where you have this xy pairs. X is the covariate or feature, y is the label. Suppose given x, I will talk about how x is being generated. Given x, how you're going to generate the label. Think of this process where you again have a latent variable that is uniformly chosen from 1 to L. Doesn't have to be uniform. And then the label is generated according to a linear model with some Gaussian noise. Okay. So x, this inner product between x and theta means you are just taking a linear relationship between the feature and the label, and then you have noise. Similarly, you can have a mixture of linear classifiers where you have this latent variable t uniformly chosen. Then a label is generated given x and t. It is 1 only if it is x, like the particular, this t will denote the hyperplane, the hyperplane that you are using as your classifier. So whether in which side of the hyperplane you are, according to that, you are generating the labels to be plus or minus 1. So any models that you have, you can actually generalize this in this mixture setting. Okay, so just one short point that mixture of linear regressions have been pretty well studied in the last 10 years, and I will give those, talk about relevant papers later on. Mixture of classifiers, there are almost no prior work, and all we could find are 2 works which doesn't do parameter recovery in the way. So far, there is one work by Sun, Anidis, and Montanari. This actually finds out, does something called subspace recovery. I'm not going into the detail of that, but they don't really try to they don't find out the component thetas that we have mentioned. And then there is another paper by Sedki, Jamjamin, and Anand Kumar, which talks about generalized linear model, and thereby talking about mixture of classifiers as well. But apart from these 2 papers, there are almost no prior work. But it is interesting because if you think about super complicated models that are being used to fit data, maybe they can be, you can use some simple mixture models to fit them. Okay. Right. So now in all this, I have mentioned how when covariate is given, how you are generating the labels by doing first creating the latent variables, then according to that latent variable is going to fix the model that you are in. Then you are going to generate this level using a linear model. But what about the covariates? How are x's being generated? So to give some theoretical or mathematical results, we need to think about what x is. Usually x follows some distribution in machine learning. So it can be Gaussian design. So x can be some IRD Gaussian vectors. And it can be other distributions as well. So you can get variety of results in that setting. There is also an experimental design setting, and it's actually pretty relevant to recommendation engine because of crowdsourcing and human in the loop, where you design the covariates and ask for levels. So you choose the movie that you want the person to rate, or so Yelp might done some survey, or I don't know, Netflix might show you at the beginning when you are creating your account a bunch of movies to sort of guess what your model is. So you can design some covariate and ask for levels, right? And the mixture problem still remains. So this is, so is the difference clear between Gaussian design and experimental design? So most of our work that we are going to present will be in this experimental design setting because that's sort of new. Okay, so there are two important considerations here. So one thing is, even if we learned a model, because we are not learning one model. So if for the case of supervised learning, we have learned multiple models because we tried to fit 2 lines or maybe 3 lines. Now, when we want to make a prediction, that's actually where machine learning sort of separates itself from statistics. What would be a good definition of a prediction error? Because you cannot really predict one thing that someone is going to like. So what should you do, right? So how are you going to define the empirical list? How are you going to show generalization type bounds? So that's like one consideration. The second thing is non-realizable case. What is non-realizable case? So far, I have given you some probabilistic modeling of the data. Right? So we are assuming it is coming from this type of design, there, this latent variable, and then something happens randomly. But what in reality you are given is just a set of data, right? XY pairs. And so you need to have, you just need to find good algorithms to fit lines in data or some other models in data. So there is actually a very big algorithmic aspect to this to do it efficiently. And maybe you can come up with some objective function and model this as an optimization problem so that you can give algorithmic results regarding how good your optimization is without assuming a realizable setting where you have a generative model. Okay. So none of these important considerations are widely, so this is about the future part of our past, present, and future of mixtures. But this is sort of the background knowledge that you need to know about mixtures. Now I'm going to go to methods. So again, I'm going to just for the, I wanted to make it a survey type talk. So I'm going to talk about the known methods for mixtures and how they can be adapted for the case of mixture of functional relationships. So how to learn parameters in mixtures? Okay, so as you sort of guessed from the previous figures that I have shown you, that when the components of the mixtures are separated enough, then you can just do some sort of clustering. You can visualize the data, right? You can visualize the data and you can see that there are 2 modes. And therefore, why don't we cluster around those 2 modes? In high dimension, by the way, you cannot really visualize and things become slightly intractable. So many times what you want to do is you take your very high dimensional data and then project it into smaller dimension where things become slightly easy, right? So for example, you have 2-dimensional data here. You can project them by doing some linear combination into 1 dimension so that the dimensionality of the problem is reduced, and then you do clustering. So this is one type of method when the means are well separated. So the first paper in this that looks at the computational perspective for mixtures is our very own by Dasgupta in 1994, where it was shown that if the separation between the means of the mixture is order of square root of the dimensionality of the problem, then you can do, then there is an efficient algorithm that will do the parameter learning for you. So subsequently that square root has been improved to the power 1/4. This is significant work. But the main idea, again, I'm not going into the gory mathematical details of this, but the main idea is that, so when you think that you're sampling from one component, it's less likely that you will end up sampling from other component because their means are pretty separated. Okay. So there is this dimensionality reduction and clustering. That approach sometimes is known as spectral approach. You can combine them by creating some matrix and finding out the leading eigenvectors to basically find the means or the leading components in the vector. So there are certain efficient algorithms. Okay, so this is good. If they're separated, well separated, we can do that. What if they're not well separated? Think of the example of the height, human height that I gave you. So, and then you use some intricate technique called method of moment. So I'm going to explain to you what this is, but before that, since I have been speaking for 35 minutes, I will tell you a story. So I learned this story from Shomobrodo. So this is from this Pearson's crab experiment. So Walter Walden and his wife went to, Walter Walden was a famous biostatistician in the late 1800s. So they went to Naples for vacation and they collected thousands of Naples crab because you cannot just let go of profit. I mean, I think all of us can identify that when you have a chance and you see crabs, you collect crabs. And then he measured the, I think 23 different properties of or features of those crabs and plotted histograms. There is one data, by the way. So these are like Naples crabs. And there is one set of data, which is the width of the frontal carapace. Okay. And he plotted that. So it's sort of, this is the histogram. You see this, this square lines are actually the histogram that he obtained. And then he thought that so this is slightly skewed, and he wanted to fit one distribution to basically estimate the means and the variance of this. However, he couldn't. So he asked Pearson, who was his friend, because apparently all these people were friends at that time. So Pearson realized something. He realized that this is, there is not one Gaussian distribution that will fit this data. I mean, his realization was that there are two Gaussians, but the deduction is pretty interesting. He proposed that there are two species of those crabs. So this is like discovering new species or like doing this, because he could see that one normal distribution is not fitting it. There are two normal distributions that are fitting this data. So maybe there are actually two types of crabs over there. Okay, and how did he do this? Because here means are not well separated. So he did it by using this method of moments. So what are method of moments? So he took the, so he assumed that, okay, this is a variable. Let's think of this as a random variable. And let me compute the moments of this random variable. So what are moments? The first moment is expectation of x, second moment is expectation of x squared, and you know what they are. Okay, so now you can, from the data, you can estimate all of these moments. Empirically, you can calculate the values of these moments. Whereas assuming that these are actually a mixture of two Gaussians, you can analytically write down these moments or express these moments as a function of those parameters. So you get something like a system of algebraic equations. Right? You solve that system of algebraic equation to find out the means of and the variance of the components. Okay? And Pearson had to take up to 6th moment to fit the two Gaussians that he is actually trying to fit here. Okay, so fast forward like 120 years or something, or 115 years, it has been shown that 6 moments actually suffice for Gaussian mixture model with 2 components. Subsequently, it has been shown that 4k minus 2 moments suffice for Gaussian mixture models with k components. Okay. So, and this was not restricted to Gaussians as well. Belkin and Sinha have shown that polynomial number of moments suffices for many other mixture families, mixture of Poissons, mixture of binomials. It's pretty interesting that method of moments are very powerful. And here you do not really need that separation grant like that assurance that the means are separated. Mixture. So this method of, because when we are relying on this separation, we are sort of taking something as our sufficient, as our necessary statistics, which is not really sufficient statistics, right? So it's not really giving us all the information that can be there. By exploiting this method of moments, you actually can get more information. Okay. So since then, method of moments have been used pretty widely and for high dimensions. Okay. So it's pretty easy to define moments for one dimension. It becomes more complicated when you have high dimensional vectors because you don't know how to take powers of them. So you take outer products of them, right? And different kind of outer products. And when you take outer products of vectors, you get something called tensors. Okay. So now you have this data, high dimensional data, and what you do is to estimate components of the tensors. Okay. And it turns out that if you have a mixture, if your data is really a mixture with small number of components, then it is the tensor that you have obtained, it has low rank. And I'm not going into the gory detail of what rank means in the context of tensors and so on. But think of matrices and it's sort of similar. Okay. So since then, there have been a lot of work, and it's a very prominent topic. How do you use tensor decomposition for learning mixtures? And this has been used not only for Gaussian mixtures and other mixtures, it has been used for mixture of linear regressions as well, in the case of Gaussian design. And there is this set of papers that I have mentioned that look at tensor methods to find out two lines in your function in the data you have, or maybe multiple lines. Okay. So is there any other thing that will give you even more information than method of moments? What if you go beyond more and more moments, maybe you get more information, and well, it is well known things are settled for Gaussians now, but what about other mixtures? So there is this result of Belkin and Sinha, which says that polynomial number of moments suffices for other mixture map families, but are these really necessary, or can we improve on those results? It turns out that you can go beyond this method of moments, and you can have something called the statistical distance-based methods. So what are these? So you can think of any probability distribution as some point in a matrix space if you can define some distance between two probability distributions. And the very appropriate distance measure is the total variation distance. So what is this distance? This is basically the largest discrepancy in probabilities of over any event that two probability distribution can induce. Okay, the largest discrepancy. So if you can somehow show that you are trying to learn mixture in certain family, and any two candidate mixtures are at least some total variation distance apart, then actually you can use so many number of samples to learn them, because the candidates are actually well separated. But it turns out that finding out a lower bound on the total variation distance for even simplest families, it's actually a pretty intricate problem. You need many information inequalities, and the analytics tools are pretty heavy, but they are pretty useful. And we have actually used them in some recent papers to show sample complexity guarantees for a bunch of different mixture families. Again, I'm not going to go into the detail of what all the parameters means, but Gaussian, binomial, Poisson, geometric, chi-square, negative binomial, these are like all well-known families. And if you have mixtures from those families, and they have variety of applications, each of them. So if you, so using this total variation distance type methods, which are analytic, and I'll not have time to go into the detail again, you can do a lot more. Okay, the main caveat is that we can make this TV distance-based methods polynomial time, but they are still pretty bad. And in practice, they are useless. You cannot really use them. In practice, the most practical and popular algorithms are something like alternating minimization. Right? And you have seen variations of this algorithm before. This is the very popular k-means type algorithm, right? So you define certain objective function that involve the latent variables and the parameters. Then you run this process, right? So let me see if this works. Yeah. So this is the EM algorithm in work where you are basically finding clusters. So you, at first time, you start with some estimate of latent variables given parameters, and then you estimate the parameters given the latent variables, and you go on doing like this. Because given one thing, like, given the profile, it's pretty easy to find one line within one profile, right? Think of the movie example that we said. So this is very practical and widely used. And there is actually more recent algorithmic interest for Gaussian mixtures, and many of our own people are actually, like from UCSD, have worked on this type of problems. This has been also used for mixture of linear regressions with Gaussian design. Okay, so there are recent papers that looks at mixture of linear regression, uses this expectation maximization or alternating minimization type algorithm. And the state of the art paper is this by Li and Liang, where they have optimal sample complexity with EM type methods. So everything is sort of good. Okay, so for mixture of linear regression, what is the next thing that, so just in the interest of time, I'm going a little bit faster. So we spoke about Gaussian design. What about the experimental design, where you can actually design the query vectors, right? So just to remind you, you have this unknown hyperplanes or lines, theta 1, theta 2 up to theta L. Now you have a query-based model. You can query with a covariate. You can ask, rate Titanic, or rate, some restaurant somewhere. So you can actually design these queries. And then the task is to recover all hyperplanes with minimum number of queries. Okay, so you have designed these queries, x1 up to xm. You get to see the levels, maybe a noisy version of the levels. Okay, because whoever you're asking, they're actually choosing this latent variable uniformly and then generating something. And then, then you want to ask the question, what is the sample complexity of this problem? I think my animation is pretty messed up over here. Okay, so now in the remaining time that we have, I will use 5 minutes of time to give you an algorithm to do efficient query design over here. So here is the setting. What you can do actually is to ask people to rate. I'm again using that example of rating to explain the algorithm, similar movies or same movies, just to find out if there are really inherent cluster, if there are really lines, more lines than one or more models than one. So you can ask someone to rate Fellowship of the Ring, rate Two Towers, Return of the King, and see whether the ratings are similar or not. So just for the interest of clarity, suppose you are just asking, just rate Lord of the Rings, one query, okay? And asking this question multiple times to users, okay? And there are actually L different models, because you have, say, 100,000 users, and I don't know like how many millions are Netflix subscription now. I think it's, I don't know if that must be the size of some small country, if not size of some big country. Anyway, so you ask one question multiple times, and you get these answers, right? So what you get, because of the way I have written it, you see, you just get something from a Gaussian mixture model, right? If you just look at the level, your level itself, the rating vector, the way we define the model, that's actually a Gaussian mixture. So this is a very simplistic assumption you can do, but this is the idea. So now you can use one of the methods that we have discussed so far, method of moments or the total variation distance-based method and so on, to actually find out these projections, x theta 1, x theta 2. So you know actually what is the actual. So this is sort of the denoising step. So your mixture learning, you're using it to denoise. So what is the more intricate step here is actually to, again, I'm going a bit quickly. So suppose now you have two movies, the Twilight Saga and Hobbit trilogy, I guess. And you have found there are these 3 clusters. Now, what you want to do next is to club the responses together, but you don't know which model matches with which model matches with the response. So you basically want x1 theta 1 and you want to club them with x2 theta 2. So you get to have 2 projection of theta 1 respectively from x1 and x2. However, you don't really know how do you do this alignment. And this alignment becomes a major problem. So how do you solve this issue? By making redundant query. So again, so suppose, let me just, okay. So suppose I have this, again, sorry about the fact that my animation is completely in random order now. Okay, so suppose these are the clubs. So you have x1 theta 1, which is matched with x2 theta 2 by mistake, and x1 theta 2 is matched with x2 theta 1 by mistake. So what you can do, you can make 2 additional queries. You can make a query with x1 plus x2 and a query with x1 minus x2, and you can also repeat that. Okay, so you might ask the question that what would be a movie that is the sum of Hobbit and Hobbit and I don't know, Twilight Saga, because you have 2 different feature vectors and I'm asking you to sum up those 2 feature vectors. Well, in some data, in practice, what you will do is you will take the sum of those features and then find a movie which is closest to this. But this is actually a drawback, and that is why we will eventually do something more sophisticated. But once you do this query with 2 additional vectors, then if you have wrongly identified, then you can check whether the sum of the 2 things that you have identified to be together, x1 theta 1 and x2 theta 2, you can just take the sum of the 2 levels and check if the sum is in the left column, and the difference, take the difference of the 2 levels and see if the difference is on the right. If that doesn't happen, then you know that you have made a mistake and you can correct your alignment. So once you have done this alignment, and with multiple components, this step becomes much more complicated, okay, and you have to do a lot more. The last step would be recovering, right? So now you have the inner product of x1 with theta I actually made a mistake over here. So this will be xi varying from 1 to m, and this is theta 1. So you basically get linear projection of theta 1 with x1, x2 up to xn. So as long as m is greater than d and you assume some regularity in your data, you will be able to recover this by solving a set of linear equation. Okay, so we can do this exercise and we can show that to recover each unknown vectors within some reasonable limit, you need order of d divided by square root of SNR, where SNR is actually the noise level, the signal level, the power of the norm of the signal, which is x time theta, divided by the sigma, the noise sigma square, the noise variance. So if you want to do something reasonable, then you need this many samples. There are variety of results in different setting under different assumption and using different methods that you can get over here. And the main drawback that I have said that what is a sum move? It is not clear. So you need to go to some other method. And we do indeed try other methods. So there is actually a sequence of papers that use other methods. So there are some tensor-based methods where this alignment becomes handleable. There are some combinatorial methods. And there are some combination of TV distance and complex analysis. So there is a series and show. This basically forms Shomobrato's thesis, and I have been working on this topic with my students for the past 3-4 years, pretty comprehensively, I would say. So, well, don't have to look at this. If you need these papers, I can send them to you, but now you have the setting, because otherwise the papers might look a little bit inaccessible. Okay, so now looking ahead, we spoke about this non-realizable setting and prediction errors. Now, the question is, if you have the non-realizable setting, can EM algorithm still work? So you have X, Y, you didn't assume any realizable, any model. You just want EM algorithm to work. So what would be the definition of working over here? You're not really recovering parameters. So one way to do this is to come up with an optimization objective. Okay? So which is sort of a min loss over here. And we have defined, we can define something like a min loss where one of the, you don't really know which one. So you have this latent variables zi's, right? That will tell you whether you are in one line versus another. And then you will choose for each sample, you will take the best fit line. Okay. So either you choose theta1 or you choose theta2, and you are taking the minimum loss among those two things. And this is your objective function. Look, this is actually a summation of several, like minimization over several sum of minimization. So this is a non-convex function. So there are recent works that look at this type of non-convex optimization. So there is work by Montanari where they look at the landscape, Montanari and his students and postdocs, I think, landscape of this type of functions and try to find out what would be an optimization guarantee. So EM algorithm, they actually in each step, they reduce the value of this loss function. So they are guaranteed to go to some local minima. But the local minima can be pretty far from global minima for these problems. So there are two approaches to handle this. First of all, show that these problems are non-convex, but they are sort of nice. So the local minimas are not very far from the global minima. So settling in a local minima would be good. That is one thing. Second approach is to show that, oh, we have a very good initial values to start the EM algorithm. And if we start from some good values, then we are going to go to global minima. So you're exploring this type of approaches. So this is work in progress. So another thing that I don't want to say a whole lot about is the prediction error, because this is, a lot of this is still in thought. But many times, especially in applications of recommendation systems or others, so you don't really recommend one movie or one restaurant. You have the options of recovering multiple things, recommending multiple things. So if you have recovered multiple lines, you can actually, for prediction error, you can, in prediction time, you can actually suggest this list. And the user would be happy as long as the correct answer is within the list. Okay. So in that way, you can actually derive some generalization bound, and we are working on it. Anyway, so I think I have spoken a lot, and now I will rest. Thank you all. If there is any question, feel free to ask.
Thank you, Arya, for the very interesting talk. All right, so let's see, questions, comments, feedback, discussions?
I have not been looking into the chat, so if there is anything.
No, I was looking at it, so not yet. So any questions? I have a high-level question. I mean, just also in the spirit of TILOS. I mean, I'm wondering what's your thoughts on, so I mean, this kind of mixed models, I mean, including mixture of linear regressions, Gaussian, and so on. Somehow the ambient space is like a Euclidean space. I wonder whether you have some thoughts on if the underlying space has some other structure, like a manifold structure? Because if your distribution concentrate in a hidden, say, manifold, or can be more complex than manifold, then using Gaussian mixture and all of this to model will not be very efficient, right?
Okay, so you are saying that when the features or the covariates are coming from some manifold, is that the question, or did I?
Right, so imagine that the data actually sampled from a distribution which kind of concentrate around a sphere, let's say.
I see.
Right.
That
so,
is the case for Gaussian, right? That's the case for Gaussians.
And not really, right? Not a ball, a sphere, right? So you would have to use many Gaussian to approximate that if you use ambient Gaussian, right?
Okay. Well, yeah. So if that happens, then it is going to become more complicated. We have not looked into that, but definitely that's one direction. I mean, I think even for the simplest cases, the problem becomes pretty challenging because of these alignment issues and so on. And the math is sort of like that involves tensors, essentially is sort of a math. I wouldn't. That's no one's fault. It's just very, it's very complicated and not very easy to follow. So right. So you can. Right. So I think one other way this manifolds might be useful is to think of this optimization landscape that I have been speaking about. So I don't know how those landscapes are going to be like. If you are satisfied, like if you are, so for different losses, are they, this loss functions, do they have some properties? Are they going to form something for, suppose my x's are all Gaussian, so are they going to be something? So that's not clear, and the geometry of this is pretty interesting as well.
Thank you. Yeah, one comment in the chat asked whether it's a very interesting talk, whether slides can be available.
Yeah, sure. I think we are planning to upload the slides in the TILOS webpage.
Right. Other comments, questions for Arya? You can just unmute yourself. Yeah, go ahead.
Just a small comment. I think with regards to the story about the crab clause. So apparently, well, so they concluded, Pearson and concluded that it's a mixture of two distributions, right? That they decided that there were two subspecies, but apparently later it was actually disproved much later. They did some genetic analysis. And they said, no, actually, it's not two subspecies 100 years later.
I'm not going to put that story, that part.
But the theory remains. Or the
theory remains, yes. Yeah. Right. Okay.
Other questions? All right, if there's no more questions or comments, let's thank Arya for the very interesting talk again. And I think Arya and the committee, the TILOS Seminar Committee, are setting up schedule for the future. I assume that we're all going to hear more from them about the next talk and so on. Okay, and thanks everyone for coming. All right.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you.